Hello and welcome to The Royals from The Times and Sunday Times with me, Roya Nikar.
And me, Kate Mancy. Today, we're in Rio de Janeiro, where Prince William is on a mission to refocus the royal agenda on climate and the environment, and to recast the monarchy's role on the global stage. But as the fallout from the Andrew saga continues at home, the question remains this week, can William reset the story, or does scandal still set the pace?
Well, it's more than 5,000 miles from Rio in Brazil to Sandringham in Norfolk, but the two feel very closely linked this week.
Because Sandringham, of course, is where Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he must now be known, the former Prince Andrew, will be housed by the King after being forced out of Royal Lodge and stripped of his remaining titles.
Rio, meanwhile, is exactly where the palace want people's attention to be, because this week, global leaders, innovators and campaigners are all gathering here as Brazil prepares to host the COP30 climate summit.
And Prince William is in town for the Earthshot Prize, his flagship environmental initiative, before travelling into the Amazon to Belém, where he'll deliver a keynote speech at the COP summit alongside the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
It is without doubt a very significant week for the Prince and for the King, because both men are deeply passionate about this issue. And it represents for the first time William here on behalf of his father and on behalf of the government. It's a moment designed to show unity, stability and a future-facing monarchy.
But the royal family knows what's at stake. They hope that this historic moment is not overshadowed by what the palace insiders bluntly call the Andrew problem back at home. A crisis they insist is now contained, or at least they hope. But is it?
So, Kate, here we are in Copacabana in Rio, and we really want to talk a lot about William and Earthshot and COP and environmental campaigning and the future of the monarchy in his eyes, but we can't really escape the Andrew problem. Because in the last couple of days, we've had the Defence Secretary saying the government are now taking steps to remove Andrew's last remaining title, that of Vice Admiral. And I've been desperate to chat to you for the last couple of weeks as you've been attempting some time off, not very successfully, poor you, just to get a sense from you as to what you thought about all of this. I mean, it's been an extraordinary couple of weeks.
It was astonishing, really, because obviously this has been building for some time. We've spoken about it before, about how this, Palace insiders told me it was a tipping point because this was the first time we saw an email from Andrew which acknowledged that he had lied about the contact he had with Jeffrey Epstein. And then what happened was that, I don't know much about a tipping point, but it felt like a kind of just falling off a cliff, snowballing into an avalanche, essentially, wiping out Sarah Ferguson on the way with another email from her. And then we had this extraordinary day where I was told that the King was considering taking away all his titles. And it's one of those stories where you hear it from two different sources and then you sort of go, that sounds like a lot because he won't be known as the Duke of York. But it was right, and we ran the story online, and within a few hours we had a statement at 7 p.m. on that Friday evening from Prince Andrew himself, or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as he must now be known, saying that he was relinquishing all his titles. That wasn't the end of it, because then in the last 2 weeks we've still had the kind of rumbling on, more revelations, more discussion about it, and whether this was all a fudge, the fact that he still had his titles but wasn't going to use them. And which led then to that extraordinary kind of Thursday night moment where the King announced that he was formally going to remove those titles. So he was going to go through the kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, if you like, to take away those titles. And then the aftermath of which was John Healey, the Defence Secretary, saying that honorary title of Vice Admiral would be removed by the Ministry of Defence. So all the kind of the nuts and bolts, all the levers were actually being pulled behind the scenes. But you did get this sense, because that, even though the palace had issued that statement from Andrew himself, you still had all the discussion, all the columnists. It was still the front pages every day. There was still so much going on. In the Times, we had a story about Royal Lodge, about the redaction of that. Clearly, that statement was not sufficient.
No.
And the palace realised that. And the palace did act. And we learned that it was, with William's backing, his support for his father in doing so. But it's just been one thing after another, hasn't it? It's just been extraordinary. And what I found really interesting at the weekend about John Healey going on a BBC News TV programme and saying we're working at pace to essentially remove that Vice Admiral honorary role. That's the one he got in 2015 for his 55th birthday, in line with kind of, all kind of royal promotions in terms of a military rank promotion, as is given out to working members of the royal family. But what he couldn't do, John Healey, was to say whether Andrew would be able to keep his campaign medal from the Falklands conflict, because obviously he served with the Royal Navy as a helicopter pilot during that conflict.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really unusual, because I didn't think that they would be doing that. And then the palace refused to deny it or stand it up in any way. So they were sort of kind of just letting that story run, which I thought was kind of strange, because it means essentially they are considering whether taking that away from him as well.
Yeah.
So it really is kind of no holds barred with Andrew. They've taken away his Prince title. They've taken away Duke of York title. They've taken away his home. And there is still, behind the scenes, obviously this growing, concern with some in the palace that perhaps his mental health is an issue as well. So, we must be mindful of the fact that this is someone who's literally had everything taken away from him and has always maintained that he's innocent in any relation to Jeffrey Epstein and any of those
any of Virginia Giuffre's allegations. We must say that he's always denied any wrongdoing. I think what you've done there is sort of encapsulate an extraordinary couple of weeks where we've seen the palace not on the front foot at any point, really, honestly. It was quite clear when we talked about it a couple of weeks ago that first statement was a bit of a fudge and wasn't really going to work. It has, despite the fact that the palace clearly want a very clear line to be drawn under everything now, it shows no sign of really, I think, totally disappearing. As you mentioned, the issue of campaign medals, the issue of the Rear Admiral title. Almost every day, Andrew is still making headlines, and not the kind of headlines that the royal family would like to see, despite the fact that, as the palace says now, there are no more levers we can pull. I mean, actually...
They have said that before.
He is still in the line of succession, which some people are, a lot of people find quite extraordinary, that everything's been sort of taken away. He's still a councillor of state. Of course, he'll never be called on to do that. But it is that sort of, it's the disappearing act of the former Duke. But is it going to be enough to disappear the story? And the feeling, I think, at the moment is no, that story hasn't disappeared yet. And given that there's so much more still that we expect to come out from the Epstein files in US Congress.
It's totally out of the palace's control, because this is all going to come out of America, most likely. A lot of it, anyway.
The last few weeks, I think, have just shown that there's a lot more to run with this story, which obviously is not what the royal family and not what Prince William here in Rio want.
And it just goes to show, doesn't it, that I think for the first time you've got a situation where princely behaviour is required for a princely title. Having said that, he maintains that 8th position in the line of succession, and you can take away his titles, but you can't actually extract his Windsor DNA. He remains part of the royal family, whether they like it or not. This story is going to rumble on, whether they like it or not, and shows no sign really of stopping. As you wrote the weekend, there are issues behind the scenes as well that they're not entirely happy with the way, of course, they're not at all happy with the way Andrew dealt with it in the first place. Nearly 6 years ago, that Newsnight interview in 2019, but they're not even happy about the way in which he's dealt with it in recent weeks, not acknowledging, not including any acknowledgement for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein.
To me, all of that begs the question. And the piece that I did at the weekend was, the revelation, which was extraordinary to me when I found out that going back to the 2019 Newsnight interview, the statement that was put out then, the statement since over, around settlements, the one we had a few weeks ago, that every time it had gone to Andrew for sign-off and courtiers had put in references to the victims, feeling that, they needed to be acknowledged, they were removed. What I can't understand is why Andrew has had so much control over what has gone out on Buckingham Palace, in Buckingham Palace's name. Even 2 weeks ago, I found that statement extraordinary, in the name of Prince Andrew, because I think what was the palace expecting was going to happen? Someone who has, as the king says in that statement, made serious lapses of judgment, errors of judgment. Why is he still getting sign-off on statements like that?
I think because it was of all the things, it was always the easiest option for Andrew to, as they say, do the right thing and walk away. You know, what I think we're seeing, which I think is really interesting, is the way in which the monarchy is changing and developing. Obviously, the Queen tackled it to some extent with Andrew, but didn't really solve the problem, let's face it.
No.
Clouded by her love for her son, no doubt, and various other matters. But what we're seeing now is a more corporate, dare I say it, approach to running an institution. Because if someone doesn't perform in their job, you're not happy with their job, you can sack them. It's not the same in the royal family.
It's taken a very long time, hasn't it?
Until now. Well, I mean, they've sacked him. He stood down from his titles, again, voluntarily, and had hoped then to come back, was told no. But it is this kind of, I think, the corporatisation, if you like, of the monarchy. It was only recently that William had an advert up for a CEO of his household, you know, and that Kate got ill and that never happened, but, you know, may do at some point. But I think the monarchy is developing, it's becoming not more bureaucratic, I would say, but, you know, it's more in line with, you know, procedure and the way we expect people to behave and repercussions if you don't, because that's what the public want to see.
That's an interesting thought. If it's becoming more like a corporation and more corporate, there are a lot of question marks over how much corporate failure has been going on over the last 15 years.
Well, this is it. I mean, this is the problem with the Andrew problem, because it's not just about Andrew.
Yeah.
We've got an ongoing conversation, haven't we, about finances and how the public is financing it. Okay.
Well, I think that's changed. I think that will now change forever. I don't think the royal family and the institution can continue to be as opaque as they have been for centuries over their finances.
I think that's the real tipping point.
Yeah.
You know, they talked about the tipping point with Andrew. I think this is the real tipping point, and it's what it stands for and what it's going to change. And it's not just about Andrew here and now. I think there will be changes brought in as a result of this, over a result of public anger over his friendship with, you know, let's face it, a convicted paedophile, convicted sex offender. After we knew that he had pleaded guilty to those crimes, he was still in touch with them. Still so many questions there. But the ramifications of this for the whole institution, I think, are going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the institution will struggle to continue to not deliver transparency going forwards. I think it'll be tough. So if we're talking about a corporate structure of the institution, you could almost say you've got the king as chief executive. You've maybe got William as his chairman. We're told by palace sources that William fully supports the king's leadership over everything in terms of how he's acted, the decision he's taken in terms of stripping Andrew of everything. There's a real sort of mood music around the palace to try and project unity between the king and Prince William over not just this, but also moving to this week, where we've got William in Brazil representing his father at COP for the first time. We've got, you know, the king we know, I was told at the weekend, has been chatting to William a lot about his appearance at Belém. He's been looking at the speech. He's been fiddling with the speech.
Envious that he's not delivering it himself.
Absolutely. But there is a sort of sense coming, isn't there, that over this crisis, that the king and the future king have been in lockstep and, you know, very, very keen to project that. Do we think they really are?
All the palaces, both households say, don't they, that they agree, you know, that William has supported his father in these moves over Andrew, that they've been talking, there's been lots of conversations about this speech that William will be giving on behalf of the British government, but also on behalf of the king. He's here representing the king. He's also here representing himself, of course, because they're his Earthshot Prize awards.
So we're here covering Earthshot, and we're here covering William in Brazil, and, you know, going to Belém in the Amazon rainforest later this week alongside Keir Starmer. Is this going to be the reset that they need? Because it's sort of got, this week it's got even bigger, hasn't it, in a way, the Andrew problem, because you had Donald Trump on Air Force One. I mean, when Donald Trump starts talking about it, you know, it's
the man who has avoided the Epstein subject.
Well, exactly, but he did tell
as much as possible.
He told reporters this week about, this is what he said about the Andrew situation and what's happened in the last few weeks. It's a terrible thing that's happened to the family. That's been a tragic situation. It's too bad. I feel badly for the family. Now, we know Trump absolutely loves the royal family. And we know when he last came to the UK for the state visit, the Andrew problem had loomed over that because Peter Mandelson, our former ambassador, had just lost his job over his links to, you guessed it, Jeffrey Epstein. So we've now got, William here representing the king, big moment for his own initiative, Earthshot, and for COP.
And Trump is not going to COP, which is
and there are
kind of an issue.
No American contingent here.
No.
What the royal family will be hoping for, and what William is certainly going to be hoping for, is that this is a sort of big reset moment. Refocus the public's attention, wrestle it back from the Andrew problem in the headlines and the scandal, bring it back to what the family does, what it thinks it's there for, duty, service, public work.
But is it possible? Standing on Copacabana Beach last night, watching William play beach volleyball, I thought it was actually because I'm here and, there were people screaming, William, William, William. He did get stuck in, his shirt came out, he had to tuck it back in, got a bit flustered. But I thought those pictures are what people will see, that kind of joie de vivre, the kind of him just getting on with business. But there is a lot of energy around the trip. On Wednesday night, we're going to see the Earthshot Prize award ceremony with Kylie Minogue, Shawn Mendes. Tonight, there are going to be drones in the sky with the Earthshot logo. We've got Earthshot Boulevard here in Rio. It's bigger than ever. It's louder than ever. It's more fun than ever. And I think this is actually a great week for the royal family to have this here, and then he can go off and do the kind of serious conference stuff at the COP summit, at the climate change summit up in Belém.
I think it's William's take on, it's him sort of pushing forwards that not new, but kind of evolving brand of monarchy, isn't it? It's a little bit celebrity, but not too much celebrity. It's a little bit diplomacy. It's a lot of, what's the word that he uses? Scaling up. He wants to sort of scale up young people. We had him yesterday, didn't we? We were in the Maracanã, which was very exciting. But he was talking to a lot of young people who were on Earthshot programs here in Brazil. And he was saying, what I don't want to do, and I always think it's quite interesting because you hear William say, I don't want to preach and tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you how to live your lives environmentally. It's sort of you guys to come up with ideas and we're here to kind of boost that and build it.
He's like a facilitator rather than a lecturer. So I suppose the question is, it's very exciting here. We're in the middle of it. But how does that play at home? Is that changing the dial at home? And I think on a rainy November morning, when you've got Rachel Reeves lecturing you about what she's going to do with the budget, perhaps a prince playing volleyball in the sunshine is not the answer. Some might say
it's lovely pictures, but it's of its time here, isn't it? I mean, it's definitely creating a big buzz here. When we're here, we're in the bubble, we're traveling with him here and to Belém. But is it going to cut through? Is it going to sort of shove the problems aside with Andrew and the family? I don't think so. Temporarily, yes, here on the ground. But I think, and not to be a doom-monger about it, but I think, as you rightly pointed out, the whole Andrew scandal of the last few weeks, which has been building 15 years, has brought to the fore big, big issues and big problems that the institution needs to address. And it needs to actually, I think, take some time strategically, a few steps back, look at all of those problems and issues and think very strategically about which ones we're going to address and in which order. The other thing to mention that happened this week, which was yesterday, which was very interesting and speaks to the heart of the other unresolved issues in the royal family. And I am talking, listeners and viewers, about the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry. Because at the very moment, on Monday morning, the Duke of Sussex's office announces officially that Prince Harry is going to Toronto this week for 2 days for an official visit. And there was quite a few raised eyebrows, not just within the Royal Rota Pack and the sort of wider pack, but actually across a lot of other sort of spheres too. The timing was very, very, very questionable. I mean, what I think is interesting, and I think Harry does feel quite relieved that he's sitting with a slight remove from the institution at the moment with all the Prince Andrew stuff going on. Anyway, I think, it just being here in Rio as we got that news from Prince Harry's team, again, was just another reminder, a sort of tangible reminder of another unresolved issue for the royal family, for the king, for William.
Yeah.
It continues to rumble and continues to cause issues and is unresolved.
I have some sympathy for the king. It's just... Yeah.
It's not really probably how he saw his reign playing out, is it? It's just one problem after another.
No, well, someone at Royal Source said to me, we've seen the last 3 years, we've seen his warmth and compassion as king. Now, this is a moment in which he's showing his steel, which I thought was interesting, that he wants to be seen as a tough king as well. And he wants to be seen to be doing the right thing and doing what's morally right. And I do get a sense of that genuinely from Charles. I don't think this is I don't think he's a PR trickster like that. I think this is something that he feels very strongly about, that he wants to do the right thing, he's driven by duty, works very hard. And I think there's a lot of sympathy for Charles and the way in which he's gone about it. Can't have been easy. It's his brother.
No, it can't have been easy. I mean, they're not close at all. But I think the last few weeks and the last few months must have taken a real toll on him. And this is a man who is conducting, carrying out affairs of state while still having weekly cancer treatment. So it's a lot for him. But I know that he will want this week to go very well for William, won't he? Because he's here on behalf of him. He'll want his, it's like the William carries the baton of his father in terms of environmental campaigning, although he's very much his own man on it. But, he does. It's, his father and that, Charles's father, the late Duke of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
It's seeing the sort of family generational, campaigning activism all the way down and continuing into the future. So I'm sure the king will wish William very, very well this week in Brazil.
So the palace has some tough days ahead. Andrew's move from Royal Lodge to Sandringham is still to come, and US investigations over Epstein's seedy world continue.
But as a friend of the royal family said, they will do what they always do. They'll get back to work and remind people of the public service the institution can return to after it rides out these storms. The family will do what they've done for generations. They'll keep calm and carry on. It's an interesting thought. I think what you and I have said for much of the last half an hour is that it's not enough. I don't think this is going to draw a line under the issues that have been raised, many issues that have been raised from the Andrew problem in terms of money, transparency, what constitutes a working royal, even when you're not a working royal, what you're getting up to behind the scenes. I think all of those issues will continue to rumble. And as we've said, I think the palace needs to look at them very strategically and very carefully going forwards, because I think we've seen the polls for the last few weeks. Support for the royal family overall remains high. In fact, King Charles, his poll rating has gone up a few points. People support how he's handled it. But I think people won't forget this. This is a story that has cut through. It touches so many things. It touches issues of sexual abuse and victims and survivors, despite Andrew always denying anyone doing it. It goes to the heart of entitlement, privilege, how the royal family, runs, how members of the royal family run themselves and their lives.
How the institution is run.
And I think...
And is it run in accordance with how all our other institutions are run?
The public anger has been high over this. And
transparency is one thing. I don't think anybody's saying, that we should be peering into their private lives in any way. But I think when that behaviour brings the rest of the firm, as Prince Philip called it, into disrepute, I think that's a big issue. And when they're representing Britain PLC on the global stage, as we're seeing this week.
Yeah. And I think it has, hasn't it? That issue of bringing the institution into disrepute. The Andrew problem has overshadowed the entire institution for the last few weeks. In fact, you could say it's rumbled on in the background for 15 years, but it has...
Oh, at least.
It's engulfed the royal family in scandal for the last few weeks.
Yeah. I think big questions remain, like you say, strategic rethink going on behind the scenes in the coming months. But I do think this is exactly the sort of thing that William and Charles should be doing, just getting up and getting on with it. We're going to see William here in Brazil doing his thing. Whatever you might think about his climate change campaigning, he's going to fly back and be with the rest of his family at the Cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday.
The King and Queen will do more engagements next week.
And that's what we expect. And I think no matter what's going on behind the scenes, like the late Queen, they get up and do the job. We saw that, didn't we, when Princess of Wales had those topless pictures printed years ago.
Yes.
And the next day she was out doing jobs, on engagements and that kind of just keep calm and carry on sensibility. And I think that will actually see them through the next few months. But there needs to be those big discussions going on behind the scenes, a big rethink. And I think that should be in consultation with the public and, Parliament if required.
Well, I mean, as the royal family keep calm and carry on over the next, weeks and months, we will continue to litmus test, won't we? The public mood. People can tell us what they think.
Yeah.
But I sense we have not heard the end of the Andrew issue.